Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast, as part of a Machina edition, this storm audio podcast, as part of a Quantix broadcast. This audio podcast, as part of a robotics biome. This audio podcast, as part of a storm robotics production. In this audio podcast, there will be a look at research poster presented works sort of from in around 2010, where this works was presented at within the remit of excellence in pediatrics in 2010. This works was uh, sort of this works or this research collaborative works looks at and asks the question around coping, and is this the foundation of well-being. This collaborative works sort of formed or initiated the basis of peer-reviewed and published work that sort of took place and was in part was linked to peer-reviewed and published work sort of subsequently as well. In this audio podcast, a look at this works at this sort of collaborative works and and beginning with and sort of starting with the background. So for several years there has been a proliferation in coping research across behavioral science or sciences, medicine, public health, and also specialties linked to sort of clinical practices, clinical and medical practices, and also specialties wherein the nursing specialty has where the nursing specialty has a sort of a basis as well. A few authors also have strived to put forward understanding in exploring such interactions through laboratory investigations. And what this means, listeners, is where there have been published works, sort of peer-reviewed and published works, looking at sort of the sort of looking at the concepts. The concepts are linked within this research poster presentation, but wherein there has been a look at sort of the different sort of physiological mechanisms and how those physiological mechanisms sort of interact in line aligned to sort of aligned to sort of varying sort of laboratory parameters and investigations, laboratory parameters and investigations. And there is works that be sort of signposted toward the end of this audio podcast, where listeners are more than welcome to check out some of the works to identify sort of the literature and some more works around this. These explorations at the same time have been crucial because coping and stress research was once seen as a sort of a two dimensional, when really coping should perhaps be viewed as sort of three or even four dimensionally and across specialties. Central to health and disease mechanisms must intertwine, and especially in young people facing chronic illnesses. In this research works, the example utilized or put forward is and surrounds is in surrounding chronic kidney disease, or CKD. The objective of this research poster works was to identify whether coping is actually a sort of the foundation behind well-being by exploring different sort of different theories and different sort of models in around the in around the in around the concept. So this research poster presentation um, uh, sort of informs looks to inform sort of mechanisms that are linked to sort of the physiological and also the physiological and also psychological aspects that are linked to sort of the theories and models. So to begin with, one of the initial sort of models and theories was from the works of Hans Selye and Hans Selye's general adaptation syndrome from 1936. And Hans Selye was apart from apart from a physician, had a an intrigue and a specialty basis in around endocrinology, in around endocrinology, and in works by Sally and Hans Sally and his and the general adaptation syndrome. Uh, the research within the research poster presentation, the theory and the model or the basis around this is where, for example, there could be there could be a sort of a main trigger or a stressor, and where a trigger or stressor where a trigger or special a trigger or a stressor then sort of activates the hypothalamus gland and pituitary gland, and where these two glands are activated, it then triggers the adrenal glands, and through the mechanisms, the a particular and specific cells in around the gut, in around the gut, the thymus and lymph nodes, and also white blood cells are also sort of triggered, but also wherein the cells wherein the cells are thereafter the adrenal glands after hypothalamus and pituitary gland trigger the adrenal glands, the cells within the gut, within the stomach or the gut, and also in around the thymus lymph nodes, and where white blood cells are concerned. These cells and particular parameters are also a part of a where there's a reactive process. Hence why listeners, there is the sort of phrase that gets thrown about, wherein wherein someone or people say that they, for example, might have a gut feeling. It is where the adrenal glands, once triggered, the stomach or the gut cells within the gut or the stomach have sort of a reactive process, and the thymus and lymph nodes are also reactive, and then in part with this is also white blood cells, and where cells are concerned, it can be either either sort of negatively as part of the reactive process, or can be sort of where the white blood cells are triggered or can be triggered to actually sort of be supportive to the and as part of the general adaptation syndrome in context of Hanselli's works. And then in the research poster presentation, there is a schematic a schematic that summarizes the works around Hanselli's general adaptation syndrome from 1936. Moving on, then from there, then there was works by George Solomon and Rudolf Moos from 1964 around 1964 till around 1969. So following Selle's general adaptation syndrome from 1936, Solomon and Moos investigate sort of the emotions aspects linked to immunity and disease through the central nervous system to understand stress and coping. In works by George Solomon and Rudolf Moos, primarily they focus on stress rather than coping. So coping in much of the literature has been sort of quite broadened out, whereas works around stress have linked to, again, as part of the background to this works, and in aligned to sort of the evidence. Stress works around stress, or stress where stress literature is concerned, has been able to link aspects of laboratory investigations where investigators have identified or sought to identify some of the sort of laboratory parameters and sort of the physiological processes that are affected through different forms of stress. However, that being said, since the central nervous system or CNS can be affected, coping is sort of a by a sort of a by almost a sort of a byproduct or a side product in sort of linking and in sort of following. And so these investigators, Solomon and Moos, between 1964 and 1969, looked at the production of autoantibody in rheumatoid arthritis, in a rheumatoid arthritis model, to understand immunological and especially autoimmunity disturbances, and linked with psychology. So George Solomon and Rudolf Moos primarily look at sort of the look at the the link through the central nervous system, but also aspects of the immunological, some of the aspects around the immunological processes, and also link to and also sort of, again, sort of some aspects around the psychology. And the major theoretical point was autoimmunity may be related to relative increase in the immunological components, and so complementary almost to the works of Selle's work from 1936, where white blood cells sort of are reactive towards the latter part of the theory, theory and the works around the general adaptation syndrome from 1936 by Sally in works by Solomon and Moose in between 1964 and 1969. The investigators had a sort of almost almost sort of sort of sort of sort of sort of verify, if you like, verify where verify where the certain immunological components are reactive as part of the triggers in around the immunological components. The increase might be the increase in around particular in around particular processes might be related to a coping or emotional effect associated with the elevation of adrenocorticoid steroid hormones. So the adrenal corticoid steroid hormones are linked actually with the physiological processes that are inherently linked, to that are sort of that are part of the trigger and link with between the hypothalamus gland, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands. And so then it is then where Solomon and Moose had identified through their works linking the central nervous system and the and sort of and some of the works in around the immunological components and psychology, that they identified there had been a sort of an elevation in around the adrenocorticoid as the in around adrenocorticoid steroid hormones that are linked to aspects of emotion. And then in this research poster works a little bit around another and one of the other sort of theories and works was or has been was described was sort of described and highlighted as and through Lazarus's harm, threat, and challenge works from 1966. And so Lazarus's works in around 1966 had primarily drawn a distinction among three kinds of stress: number one, harm; two, threat; and three, challenge. And in works by Lazarus from 1966, the investigations sort of defined the three distinctions of in linking harm, threat, and challenge. Where number one, harm, refers to sort of primarily, according to Lazarus's works, refers to the psychological damage where harm referred to the psychological implications that already exist in following a particular trigger. And then threat, where a threat is had been defined by Lazarus's work in 1966 as the anticipation of that of a threat that primarily has not taken place, but owing to the psychological some aspects in around the psychological implications and where stress is concerned, it is where Lazarus defines threat as an imminent as an imminent part of the process. And then three, where challenge in around challenge is results from sort of difficult demands that an individual may feel confident about overcoming, but effectively mobilizing and deploying coping resources. Thus, within sort of the link around the central nervous system, there are processes through the physiological processes, and again in sort of complementary to the works of Hanseli in context of endocrinology, for example, where through a specific physiological from a physiological basis, there are certain endocrinological components that are primed to prompt sort of the mobilization and then prompting the sort of deployment of coping resources, thus allowing and prompting sort of physiological processes and processes in around psychological and so those processes aligned to the autonomic central nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system to prompt response as the appropriate response. Again, to sort of to elaborate, Lazarus's works was more or had been more in around the psychological aspect and not so much the physiological processes of where stress is concerned, but also where coping had been a base had been a basis as well. And then there's works by George Engel, George Engel, and the biopsychosocial model, and the works by George Engel was where the research where the research from George Engel was from in around the late 1970s, around 1977, and where the works by George Engel or Engel's biopsychosocial model looked at primarily linked to three main aspects, where George Engel's works looked at the link between the body, and the spirit, the mind, the body, and the spirit, and where George Engel's works look to identify or look to understand and also identify the sort of interaction, between the mind and the body and spirit, and how sort of amongst the sort of the physiological processes and the sort of psychological processes, the how the mind, again linking to the central nervous system, the body, and linking to the physiological processes, and the spirit in context of the reactive of the reactive the reactive process that is linked to the mechanisms that are linked to the mechanisms between the central nervous system and the physiological processes. And so in Engel's works, there had been a sort of work to understand how through particular diseases, particular conditions, particular diseases, for example, how 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 patients had gone through or went through particular conditions, and how the mind, the body, and the spirit had been had a sense of interplay, but also how how it had been affected, or if it was effective, or much like the works around linking to Solomon and Moo's work from 1969, and also in linking works in around Hansen's general adaptation syndrome from 1936, the biopsychosocial model from 1977 sort of looked at the sort of interplay between the again the mind, the body, and sort of spirit, to understand the processes, the sorry part of the processes, but also the sort of the sort of components that are that were reactive, that were either reactive or stayed sort of dormant in preparation of a particular threat. And then there was works by Folkman and Lazarus, where there was a collaborative effort between 1980 up to 1997, and where the investigators looked at works around positive emotions, and where there had been sort of substantial evidence that positive emotions are a normative aspect of the coping process, and they may help restore a physiological and psychosocial coping resources. Less is known about the full range of coping processes, including sort of the content, timing, and duration, which are associated with the regulation of positive as opposed to negative emotions. Evidence also does suggest, or evidence did suggest, or had suggested in the works from Folkman and Lazarus and positive emotions, that underlying beliefs, values, goals are also implicated in and as part of the sort of coping processes, and where in works by in earlier works by Hanseni Solomon and Moose, and also in works by George Engel's biopsychosocial model from 1977. These particular theories and the models, those models did not sort of delve into so much in around the aspects of looking at sort of how, for example, individuals in through investigations, wherein through investigations that works did not primarily have a focus in around values, in aspects of values and goals. And so in Folkman and Lazarus's positive emotions, in the positive emotions, in around the positive emotions works from 1980 up to 1997, Folkman and Lazarus had been able to sort of prompt sort of the evidence in around sort of the sort of fundamentals, fundamental aspects of where as human beings, as far as human beings concerned, in around aspects of intention, if you like, wherein aspects around beliefs and values and goals are concerned. And then linking quite closely between Engel's work, George Engel's work from George Engel's work around the biopsychosocial model in around 1977, and works in around from Solomon and Moose from 1964 to 1969. There had been a sort of a concept amongst the literature that started developing more so, where the concept looked at a joining or a linking between three mechanisms, three main sort of components or mechanisms, sort of more sort of stringently, and that was where that was where works and literature started looking more so into the psychoneuroimmunology, or the PNI concept, where there was a link more into the nervous system, more of a link around the nervous system and the immune system and the endocrine system, where in literature, for example, in sort of more prospective literature, the endocrine system, for example, in context of aspects around stress research, for example, even coping research is somewhat sort of negated or neglected. But what in the psychoneuroimmunology or PNI concept, where the components being the central nervous system, or the nervous system, the immune system, and the endocrine system still had been sort of stringently a part of the sort of underpinnings of where investigators in amongst the literature had focused works to understand the link between varying forms of disease, and varying forms of disease, where disease is where disease affects various aspects of health, or various aspects of health. And so the disease and health the health sort of the disease and sort of health interaction aspect had been a sort of the sort of main sort of underpinning aspect of the psycho neuroimmunology concept, the psychoneuroimmunology concept. And in more sort of prospective works, there has been works looking at the interaction or the interplay between these components amongst varying forms of disease, the varying forms of disease and health, and in link and again in amongst varying varying sort of specialties. And then sort of and then in within this research poster presentation, there is a there is a sort of an overview that looks at the diathesis stress model. And so the diathesis stress model takes into consideration both predisposing characteristics of of individuals and an instigating event. The model proposes or puts forward puts forward that the impact of an initiating event, something that triggers that triggers a sense of a sense of prompt, or a sense of being primed, is perhaps more likely to contribute to a sense of chronic illness, or even contribute to a part of contribute to a sense of a disability in those who interpret symptoms as an indicate and as indicative of serious problems. So activities that increase pain, for example, tend to be avoided. So that this so tend to be avoided. Thus, what the diathesis stress model is means, in sort of as a crux, if you like, is where, for example, if individuals before even anticipating, if individuals know of have a sense of that they know, or they feel that that for example, if trying something, if before sorry before trying something, something that is that could be that could potentially be of advantage, can be advantage without trying or anticipating that aspect. The individuals instantly are primed to the more disadvantaged aspect. Disadvantaged sort of a default position, where individuals do not for example, are not primed, or do not prime themselves to take sort of risks, when those aspects, in context of human nature, are actually more advantageous for us, because are more advantageous because they prime the immune system, they prime the physiological processes, and they prime the sort of central nervous system to actually prime sort of the components and processes to actually to actually um, to actually react to a stressor in such a way that would be more advantage than disadvantage, but owing to the way that some individuals and some individuals are they default to a position where they rather not, where as part of the diathesis stress model, they do not prime themselves to anticipate or look at taking risks. So these so those so instantly activities that that potentially could increase pain, but where this pain may have some where this pain has some disadvantage, has some disadvantage, but more advantage, tend to be avoided instantly. And so these at-risk people believe that all activities that increase symptoms, or that are anticipated to those cause injury, should be completely avoided. And the diathesis stress model can be used at the same time to integrate factors to coping in young people facing varying forms of chronic illnesses, and specifically in around chronic kidney disease, or CKD. So finally, this research poster presentation has some conclusions, and puts forward a sort of a hypothetical model in around coping as well. And so the conclusion is in around this works is where quite clearly coping calls for a deeper and more intricate understanding, especially in children and pediatrics and young people whom are facing chronic illnesses such as chronic kidney disease or CKD. And to understand coping models and theories, coping models and theories require further investigation or exploration and scrutinizing accordingly. And there are no amongst the literature, there are no official coping models. The foundation behind good well-being and a sense of quality in life is coping. And so to conclude, the mind the mind the mind both the mind and the body tend to work in synchronicity. The hypothetical model the hypothetical model in around this works, and in this research poster, where hypothetical model of coping have been put forward, where much like a pyramid, at the bottom of a pyramid you have, for example, a coping, and where coping is linked to sort of the psychological and physiological sort of stems of coping, and then the upper part of the pyramid in this hypothetical model is where you have well-being, and then above well-being, but above coping and above well-being, you have quality of life. And so the hypothetical model or the construct or the hypothetical model sort of prompts really that, for example, if pediatrics and young people suffering from varying chronic illnesses, varying forms of chronic illnesses, if they cope sort of psychologically and physiologically, they then have it can be postulated that they have a sense of well-being, although at the same time it's not transparent in the literature, in the literature, but also but as part of the it's not transparent amongst the literature, amongst the literature in around where well-being, where for example, if for example pediatrics and young people cope psychologically and physiologically, that they have a sort of decent sense of well-being, but what can be postulated is that if they do cope psychologically and they do cope physiologically, then they have at least a sense of well-being. And then if coping psychologically and physiologically, if coping physiologically and psychologically are 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 sort of are sort of are sort of the are done well by pediatrics and young people, for example, and then where then there is a sense of well-being, then and thereafter, pediatrics and young people have a sense of quality of life. Literature around pediatrics and young people, in around varying forms of in amongst the literature, have often sort of jumped straight into looking at aspects of quality of life, and sort of unfortunately negated or neglected sort of the coping aspect and the sort of well-being aspect. And so in this research poster works and works that was presented again at the Excellence in Pediatrics in 2010, this hypothetical model prompts a basis where again that quality of life is at the top is, for example, at the top of a pyramid, and once sort of coping psychologically and physiologically for example, are done and done well, and where then and thereafter there is a sense of well-being. And so the hypothetical model in this work is linked again is a hypothetical model, but a hypothetical model that also sort of draws on and links onto the sort of existing theories and models where stress and coping in aligned to varying sort of triggers sort of physiologically and psychologically are concerned. In this research poster presentation, there are some citations and references where listeners are welcome to check out, and those the references and citations will be added as part of this audio podcast. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of a Machina edition. This Storm audio podcast as part of a Quantix broadcast. This audio podcast as part of a Lobostics biome, and this audio podcast as part of a Storm Lobostics production.